Well, hello there again, folks. Happy Wednesday to you all. Wednesday, March 25th, as we pick it up with the war that made America, the French and Indian War. All right, target questions remain the same, folks. Why did conflicts arise in North America between France and Great Britain? And how did the outcome of the French and Indian War reshape North America? All right. I'm hoping everybody's having a great day and it's about to get greater because we got plenty of videos for you to watch today. All right. Plenty of wartime videos. All right. So you like blood, you like guts, you like violence. We got the videos for you. So stay tuned, folks. Here we go. Let's get it going. Here we go. All right. Hands up, everyone. We're clocking in and down. Previously in the swamp. Dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun. All right. So previously in the swamp, folks, we've been talking about this war that made America, as a lot of historians like to refer to it as. All right, and some foundational knowledge we've been able to acquire over the last couple of days. So we know the combatants of this war. We know that this is going to be a conflict that's going to take place in North America between France with their Native American allies versus the British Empire with the colonies and, of course, their Native American allies. We also know the cause of war. We know that ultimately it was a land dispute, and we know that natives will fight on both sides. But for the most part, the Ohio Indians will fight with the French, whereas the powerful Iroquois nation will side with the British. As for colonial preparations and results, we saw good old Ben Franklin's attempt to unite the colonies into one general government failed miserably in 1754. He told the colonists, hey, we got to join or we're going to die. And the colonies and the colonial governments chose to die and take their fight by themselves. And today we're going to talk a little fighting styles. We're going to talk settings. And then, of course, we're going to take a look at these fighting styles and the battlefield setting all through video. So here we go. All right, so yesterday, guys, just to clear up a few things, yesterday the question that led you was the French and Indian War avoidable? This huge global conflict between two major European powerhouse rivals, economic rivals, political rivals, religious rivals. But could this war have been avoided? So you watched a little video, all right, and each of the different groups. So whether you were part of the Native American group or whether you were French or whether you're British, everybody had a problem that they had to deal with. But the reality of the situation was they did not select a solution that led to peace. In fact, when it came to was war avoidable, the answer was no on all scales because France did not want England encroaching on their trade and moving into the Ohio River Valley. So they took an aggressive act by building fortifications out in the Ohio Valley to basically set up a defensive structure to tell the English to stay out. And then if you're the English or the British in this case, you're not listening to France. You have no respect for France. So when France tries to put up those forts, you almost take that as an act of aggression. And then as the Iroquois nation, they got their own issues with Native Americans, but they see this as the perfect opportunity to kind of play off of both the sides here and almost to allow them maybe to provoke a war and allow them to fight with each other and then move in for the kill. But I got to tell you guys, peace was on nobody's minds in 1754 when there was a struggle between British and the French over the Ohio River Valley. So war could not have been avoided, but hopefully through your answers you were able to do so. But since we're talking war today, it's important that you understand the strategies that each side is going to employ because when we're watching these videos today, I want you to look for these different strategies. So, for example, the British and their colonial allies are going to use a style of fighting called volley fire. And when you look at this picture here, you will notice you have one row of British regular soldiers here on a knee holding their muskets, right? Taking shots at the enemy. And then you have a second line of British soldiers. All right. And they're doing the same. They're firing. So generally, when the front line is firing, the back line is reloading, and vice versa. But this style of fighting was called volley fire. And this was the type of fighting that was perfect for the plains of Europe. All right. In practice, it often consists of having a line of soldiers all fire their weapons simultaneously. So at the same time, at enemy forces on a command. This is usually to make up for inaccuracy, slow rate of fire, and a limited range of weapon, which requires extensive effort to reload. So these muskets, all right, maybe from 50 yards, all right, you're talking they have decent accuracy, but anything after 50 yards, you're asking for it, right? It's not very good, and it's very slow. It's very timely to reload, all right. But this style of fighting would be effective for fighting in large areas, large flat areas. All right. So is this an effective fighting style and where would it be effective? Well, that's for you guys to answer. All right here. The next fighting style that's going to be employed more by the French and their Native American allies is something called guerrilla warfare. So when you look here, all right, at this picture, you can see that the natives are all hiding, they're crouching, all right. It almost looks like they're sniping or ambushing the British enemy in this picture here. So guerrilla warfare, by definition, is a form of irregular warfare. This type of fighting would be considered very cowardly and not very gentlemanly, like the volley fire technique that we just discussed, but a form of irregular warfare in which a small group of combatants use military tactics, including ambushes and sabotage and raids and petty warfare and hit and run tactics and mobility, being able to fight and run, all right, to fight a larger and less mobile traditional military. So over here it says comments and thoughts. Well, is this an effective fighting style? And if so, where would it be an effective fighting style? And where would this fighting style of hit and run tactics, where would it not really be that effective? Think about that one. So the setting of many of the early battles of the French and Indian War looked somewhat like this. So I want everybody to study this picture here. And what characteristics do you see? What geographic features do you see? What physical features do you see? All right. So look at this picture and what kinds of features do you see? But listen to this quote by a British general. He said, "The battles of the war took place in mountains, forests, and fierce wildernesses. Trees, rivers, waterfalls, mountains, and hills twisted the landscape, making straight on combat virtually impossible and highly unlikely." So, for which side would a setting like this benefit and why? Would it be the linear style, the volley fire technique of the British? Or would it be the guerrilla warfare, irregular technique of the Native Americans and their French allies? You can't discuss the French and Indian War without talking about this hero. Do you know who it is? Do you know what founding father is going to make his debut at the French and Indian War? Do you know who this hero is that we're holding out for? Maybe do you know him now? Do you know him now? Do you know him now? Do you know who this 21-year-old Virginian is who's going to make his debut at the French and Indian War? He is larger than life. And he is the hero we're waiting for. Did you say George Washington? Because if you did, you would be correct. All right, because today we're going to take a look at George Washington's role during the French and Indian War and why he was such a significant figure. And we're going to watch a young George Washington in action. But before we do that, I need to set the scene about G Dub's first mission. So this right here is Governor Robert Dinwiddie of Virginia, a member of the Ohio Company, which was a company that was created to buy land out in the Ohio River Valley in an attempt to make money off of it. The idea was to buy this land dirt cheap and then sell it to future settlers as they began to move into the Ohio River Valley. All right, but also we find that the French did not appreciate the British and the Ohio Company buying land out there because it wasn't their land to buy. And then they started trading with Native Americans. And this is really going to rub the French the wrong way. So what do? A hostile and aggressive act. They're going to build Fort Duquesne in modern day Pittsburgh to drive the colonists out of the frontier, to basically serve as a stop sign that says, you cannot come out here. This is our land. Back off. The French wanted all the Indian trade all to themselves. But this wasn't jiving with the Virginians. So Robert Dinwiddie is going to send a young 21-year-old George Washington out to the frontier to Fort Duquesne to tell the French to take a hike. Unfortunately, though, the French told him, get lost and scram. George Washington was turned back. But that wasn't the last we'll see of George Washington after he was told by the French that he was not going to leave. Let us now take a look at a young George Washington in action.
That was the war that made him the leader he was. The French and Indian War. But the day it all began, there was nothing heroic about the father of his country. To be fair, Washington is only 22. Ambitious and a little naive, he doesn't realize he's about to become a pawn in a chess game he doesn't understand. They are here. Washington's orders are to drive the French from this contested part of the frontier, with force if necessary. He doesn't know these French soldiers are on a diplomatic mission. The eager young major doesn't take the time to find out what the French are after. Fire! It's George Washington's first taste of battle, and he likes it.
I can, with truth, assure you that I heard the bullets whistle. Believe me, there was something charming in the sound.
Their retreat cut off by Washington's Indian allies, the French surrendered within minutes. Their officer sits wounded.
This is Ensign Joseph Coulon de Villiers de Jumonville. He's an envoy. Here's a letter from his commander.
I do not speak French.
Under the protocol of the day, Washington is responsible for the well-being of the wounded Frenchman. But he soon realizes that this deep in the woods, different rules apply.
Tu n'es pas encore mort, mon père.
It turns out this Indian leader, known as the Half-King, has his own agenda. Within minutes, the Half-King's warriors plunder the French camp, scalping the dead and wounded before they leave. The massacre is not an outcome Washington expected, nor could he have foreseen the consequences. This incident will trigger an all-out war for North America that soon spreads around the world. We call it the French and Indian War. This is the story of a war that helped create a new nation no one could ever have predicted. This is the story of the war that made America.
Was that tomahawk shot to the head not insane? Whew. All right, but that was Washington's first experience. And how about that line? He heard the bullets whistle, and there was something charming of the sound. That is your future father of your country, ladies and gentlemen. But he just allowed this French diplomat to be assassinated by his Native American ally, all right, known as the Half King. So George Washington, not off to a great start, man. Not off to a great start. All right, and speaking not being too great. Well, George Washington knows that was a big no-no to have that guy, assassinated the way that he did, and he knew the French would be out for retribution. So, what do you do if you know you're going to be attacked and you're going to defend yourself out here in the frontier? Well, you got to build a fort. So he's going to build a fort, one of great architecture and advanced materials. No, I'm just playing. But the name of the fort is called Fort Necessity. So let's now fast forward to the French response to hearing that this guy Jumonville was assassinated. So let's take it to our next video.
Meanwhile, Washington has withdrawn his men to a large meadow. They build a crude stockade that the Virginians wryly name Fort Necessity. Washington expects the Half King to help defend the fort. But the Indian leader has lost confidence in the young major.
This Washington, he is a good-natured man, but he has no experience. Always driving us to fight by his direction. Now he wants us to make a stand with him against the French. That little thing upon the meadow.
Washington's only Indian ally leaves.
We have no choice. We will make our stand here.
The French have no such problems with their native allies. They arrive accompanied by 100 Shawnee, Mingo, and Delaware warriors.
About 9 o'clock on the 3rd of July, the enemy advanced with shouts and dismal Indian yells.
Washington intends to fight face-to-face in the field, European style. But the French and their Indian allies don't cooperate.
They then, from every little rising tree, bush, stump, and stone, kept up a golden, constant fire, which we returned as best we could. Till late in the afternoon, when there fell the most tremendous rain that can be conceived. It filled our trenches with water and wet not only the ammunition and the firelocks, but also the few stores that we had, leaving us only a few bayonets for defense.
By nightfall, the situation is hopeless. When the French commander offers terms for surrender, Washington signs the soggy document. Unable to read French, he relies on a Dutch officer to translate. It turns out that Jumonville's brother is taking a sweet revenge. Washington doesn't learn until later that the document includes a confession to the assassination of Ensign Jumonville. The morning after the battle, the victorious French allowed Washington to retreat towards Virginia with his wounded and tattered troops. Word of his defeat spread quickly. This was not the kind of fame the young Washington had been seeking. The date, oddly enough, was the 4th of July, 1754.
Oh, Georgie boy. 0 for 2, my friend. First, you have a French diplomat assassinated, and now you get whooped at Fort Necessity. And now you had to surrender and you get kicked back to Virginia, and you got to go march back there with your tail between your legs and admit to everybody that you weren't the military man that you thought. But this, folks, this chain of events has now ignited what's known as the French and Indian War. And it's all thanks to dun, 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 George Washington. Georgie boy Washington. G-dubs. All right. But this is also going to lead now to in 1755, Britain and France are now going to send in the real soldiers. They have seen enough. They have seen enough of these colonial bumpkins messing things up in the frontier, and France is not going to let this land go easily. So now they start sending in the real soldiers, And the big real soldier, or the commander of the British regulars, the big bad commander, is a guy by the name of Edward the Bulldog Braddock. And he's coming here to North America to show these colonists what a real military general looks like and what a real fighting force looks like. So this is Edward the Bulldog Braddock in action. But he's going to take on George Washington as an advisor since he knows the land inside and out. So let's see if Edward the Bulldog Braddock has a little more success with driving the French out of the frontier.
The spring of 1755 brought a sense of renewal and opportunity. Britain sent an army under General Edward Braddock to assault Fort Duquesne, the French stronghold at the Forks. The war that had frustrated George Washington's ambition now offered him a chance to fulfill it.
He's hoping to find a way into the British Army, to be a regular officer, which is his heart's desire at that time. And to do that, he goes to Braddock and asks to become an aide.
So he went along as an aide to General Braddock. Braddock was the wrong kind of general to fight in the wilds of North America. He was a typical parade ground, European, stand up and fight sort of a guy. And the French and the Indians out there weren't.
Braddock has assembled a well-equipped but cumbersome force. As it labors its way west, the column of 2,100 British and American soldiers stretches out for miles. Several weeks into the mission, Braddock, Washington, and a sizable advance unit forge ahead. On July 9th, they are near the Monongahela River, less than 10 miles from Fort Duquesne. Without warning, lead slams into Braddock's men from 3 directions. The enemy is everywhere and nowhere.
Indians are charging from all directions. There's powder smoke everywhere. Nobody can get their bearings. Where are the front lines? Where are the flanks? And the wounded are screaming. The British regulars collapse completely. Washington keeps his cool. in the midst of a tremendously chaotic situation.
As General Braddock falls, mortally wounded, only one man steps into the breach.
Washington directs Braddock's officers who have no idea what to do. He tells them to pull Braddock out and where to send his wagon and where to withdraw. And Washington is put in command by default of a whole regular British force.
In this action, we can see something that later on we're going to see he's very good at, which is sort of a calm presence, a galvanizing presence, and an ability to bring order to a chaotic situation.
Washington, the general's aide, is now in command, a prime target. Enemy soldiers take aim. A bullet tears through Washington's coat, close enough to kill. In rapid succession, more musket balls rip his clothes. Amidst the carnage, Washington manages to organize a retreat. The dead and wounded are everywhere. By any measure, Washington should have been one of them.
And it's a story that people will keep telling for the next 20 years. And even later on, when he's appointed commander-in-chief, they say, oh, it's the hero of the Monongahela.
A Virginia minister proclaimed that Washington's survival seemed the work of Providence. For the first time, Washington had been revered as someone destiny had chosen for greater things.
And in truth, just looking at it, you almost have to believe it. Because to have survived that battle without even being scratched while so many others went down is a bit of a miracle.
Was Washington meant for greater things? Was he the chosen one? So now to wrap this lesson up, now that we saw George Washington in action on a number of different occasions, what is your assessment of a young G-Dubs? Was he a hero or was he a zero? All right, folks, that's all for today. Have a great day.